Thank you very much, and good evening, brothers and sisters and young people. Welcome to our midweek Bible class. Hope everything is going fine at your homes. It's been quite some time since we looked at David and the Philistines. You can see maybe right at the bottom there, it was last November, November the 20th of last year. It was the last time we did the class on David and the Philistines. So I got a little bit of a refresher, a little bit, not a whole lot, but a little bit of a refresher. We ask these kinds of questions of, David fought against the Philistines, and he fought against the Philistines' way of life, and he defeats them as individuals, as everybody knows, the most famous one that he defeated, and he went after them in large numbers. And there's some things that we can learn from David. And it's not just that Philistines can be defeated, although the last class we talked about Goliath, and he did defeat Goliath. But this class, we're going to look at two other individuals and see something more, a more powerful allegory, or part of still the same powerful allegory. And so this is the kind of things that we can learn from the Philistines. It's not working too good. There we go. For some reason, a little delay there. And it went pretty far. All right, just a little lag. Anyway, so who are the Philistines? And so this is what we did last time. I put this into your lexicon or your Bible software and put up Philistines, whether that's singular or plural. And this is all the verses you find. It's a little bit interesting that you don't find them in the New Testament, and you find all these places. And believe it or not, I looked at every single verse and tried to learn something from, or what the verses were talking about in every single case. And what we find out in Judges' time is that the Philistines are left back. If you will not drive them out, the inhabitants of the land from before you, they shall come to pass that those which you remain of them shall be pricks in your eyes and thorns in your side, and they shall vex you in the land that you're in. And so this is what happened time of the Judges. Right after that is when they start to see all the occurrences. And so, but when you look at the amount of the occurrences, what we're looking at here is that look how many are in David's time. The overwhelming majority of the incidences with Philistines ends up being in David's time. 1st and 2nd Samuel, a little bit in Chronicles, and some of the other Psalms. And so a lot of interaction happens. And of course, we've looked at the past and the future of that. So here they are, some of it in the future. There's the two Hebrew words, whether it's in the singular or in the plural. And these Philistines have prophecies concerning them, some that have been partially fulfilled, some have yet to be fulfilled. And so this is what we're highlighting here in some of these other parts of the prophets. And there are many other parts to look at. And so that might be a little bit too far to go tonight to go into all the stuff that's into the future part. And we looked a little bit at who the Philistines are and where did they came from. And I've narrowed it down to these key verses that we invite you to look at. We looked at them last time, but just a reminder of them. In Genesis, the Philistines are there in Genesis chapter 10 with the table of nations of all the other nations. So it's not a surprise to us. We find out that God moves the Philistines and moves them into place to be in Israel at this particular time. And the part is that, God rules in the kingdom of men, and God has a plan, and he's working out that plan. And so this is part of what we can see just by quickly looking at some of these verses. Now, Here's the two verses in Joshua and in Judges, and I want you to turn there with me to them. The first one is in Joshua chapter 13. I do this because it talks about when the Philistines start to become an important part, and certainly just before David comes into the scene. And so if you've turned up to Joshua chapter 13, it's the first three verses. And it says that when Joshua was old and stricken in years, and the Lord had said unto him, Thou art old and stricken in years, that there remaineth yet very much land to be possessed. And this is the land that yet remaineth, all the borders of the Philistines, and all of Gershai, and from Sihor, which is before Egypt, even unto the borders of Ekron northward, which is counted to be the Canaanite, the five lords of the Philistines, and the Geshurites, and the Ashdodites, and the Ashkelonites, and the Gittites, and the Ekronites, and the Ivites. Excuse me. And so Joshua at chapter 13 is after they've divided out the land, and it's just reminding us that the Philistines, that they're in the land, and they haven't conquered the Philistines. Their land is intact all the way down from the south all the way up to the north. And so here they are for that. The second one we want to look at is in Judges chapter 2. You want to spin over to that. Now in Judges chapter 2, excuse me, and I'm going to start at verse 20. And let's put it into the context and the theme for this tonight's class. It says, "And the anger of the Lord was hot against Israel, and he said, Because this people have transgressed my covenant which I've commanded their fathers, and they have not hearkened unto my voice. And I will not also henceforth, or not henceforth, drive out any from before them, the nations which Joshua left when he died, that through them I may prove Israel, whether they will keep the way of the Lord, or walk therein, as their fathers did keep it, or not. Therefore the Lord had left the nations without driving them out hastily, neither delivered he them into the hand of Joshua." And if we pretend for a moment that the chapter divider is not there, it says, "Now these are the nations which are the Lord have left, to prove Israel by them, even many as Israel had not known the wars of Canaan, only that the generations of the children of Israel might know to teach them war, and at least such as knew nothing thereof, namely the five lords of the Philistines, and all the Canaanites, and the Zidonians, and the Hivites, that dwelt at Mount Lebanon, and at Baal Hermon, entering in at Hamath." And so the point is, excuse me, that these Philistines were left in the land, and that God says they were left in the land to prove them, and that they didn't know anything about war. And so the fighting against the Philistines is one of the ways that God is testing the Israelites, and therefore for the allegory part, he's testing us. And so we can join in with to learn the same lesson. And so remember the Philistines, this is their land up here. We got this map. We said all the way down to the south, there's their 5 cities over here on the left. And all the way to the top to Ekron. And so, excuse me, all this land that the Israelites did not conquer. I've driven these little brown lines here to represent the mountain area of Judah and Israel. So it talks about this is where the Israelites had control, but down on the Shephelah and down into the south of the Negev, the Israelites did not control this land, and they still don't control some of it now, right? So it seems to be that would be the case. And so here are the 3 main Philistines that say this, the allegory that we're looking at: Goliath, Achish, and Itai, if I'm enunciating that correctly. And they're completely interesting. I remember this is my favorite cartoon from the kids. Here it is, that showing David fighting Goliath as a giant, and he takes care of him. I just wrote a small review, and that we looked at Goliath and that he's stamped with six. I'm not sure that David saw all the sixes in him. It's not like he said, "Hey, just a second, doesn't that spearhead weigh 600 shekels?" I don't think that that's what he was going. So those types of things are put in the record so that we would pick up on the inference, six being man and the part of sin. And so this is what how we said David saw Goliath. The record reminds us of the six. The serpent on the pole would, from out of Numbers, David would have had an opportunity to learn from that. He certainly saw Goliath in front of him. And we projected even farther that he would see the defeating of sin in the Lord Jesus Christ's work. And there were a couple of things that remind us that he would be able to do this. One of them is what David did with the head of Goliath. And we looked a little bit at that particular one. But really what it gets down to, if I could put that into a paragraph to try to summarize, paragraph or two, a small one, is that you have the anointed future king of Israel defeating sin, the carnal mind, Goliath, bright as large as life, takes his head and takes it to the place where God showed Abraham with the sacrifice of his son Isaac. And so that's the main part of what we talked about last November, and we looked at a little bit of that. And David continued with that allegory. Remember, he goes, it's not just the one Philistine that was like that. You got the whole family. This is the Goliath's family and who he's related to. You can see the giants were left in the land, about in Numbers. Some were left in the land in Joshua's time. This is in 2 Samuel 21 is where this is listed out. And you can also see that they're related to the symbol of sin in the flesh, so they had 6 fingers and 6 toes. And he takes care of anyone or the whole family, whoever one types that type with Goliath. So now we'll go on to our second type, which is Achish. David and Achish the Philistine. You want to take a moment to think about David and Achish the Philistine and ask these questions, which I asked myself, and we'll try to answer the best we can, is who is Achish? Why did David go to him? It seems kind of a little bit odd. And the other part would be, well, then why did Achish receive him? Because he didn't go once, he went twice. The second time, he was there for, it says a year and 4 months, but he was there even longer than that, because that was before what we have read tonight as our reading in 1 Samuel chapter 29. And so it seems that there's quite a bit intriguing to learn about Achish. And so let's see if we can unlock some of these parts of him. So I know this slide's a little busy. Got Achish here up in the left. And Strong's number 397. If you needed to look it up, and Strong's not a very help. It just says it's an uncertain derivation. And in fact, as we've said before, that names can be a bit tricky. In some lexicons and dictionaries, they don't even bother to give you a name because it seems that they're a bit all over the place. And so here we have, using the concordance down the bottom left, 21 verses, he shows up. Here they are from 1 Samuel, the majority of them are. And there's this one outlier out here in 1st of Kings. Well, Achish, well, he's a Philistine. We can probably figure that part out. Maybe you didn't know he was the king of Gath, but he's the king of Gath in David's time. And if we were to take a stab at what his name means, you have Ish, that's the man part, and the lexicons and dictionaries will bring you to that. And the first part, what I call the preface, is whether it means either surely or truly or absolutely. And so what he's saying is that surely he's a man. That's what his name means. Surely he's a man. He's the first man. He's first among men. That's his name, and that's his characteristic as he approaches out. Unger's Bible Dictionary says probably, so he means he's taking a stab at it. It's a general title of royalty, Achish, like Abimelech, another Philistine kingly name, interchanged with the title in Psalm 34. And I forgot to announce that right. I know the last time Brother Paul said it's actually Abimelech, right? Father King. That's what he thinks of himself. And this Achish also thinks of himself that way. So here's Achish. These verses are organized a little for us. You got the ones in First of Samuel there. That ends up being the, I'm calling it the first encounter, but first recorded encounter. We asked that question, why would David think it was okay to go to Gath to see Achish, to get away from Saul? Seems like an odd choice. And we find that Psalm 34 matches up with that. I don't want to go to Psalm 34. I'll never get out of there. Remember, we did the historical Psalms, and this is one of them. That's where we get those marked up. It has the historical marker that works with them. So does the Psalm 56 in this second encounter. That has the historic marker in the Psalm, and we've put that in with part of David's second encounter. And it could really go for both of them. I don't want to be too dogmatic about that. But you have this second encounter from 1 Samuel 27, where David decides to go there. And we have it all the way to the end of 1 Samuel 29, where Achish's name is being listed. And of course, in chapter 30, you have the final defeat of Saul and the end of David being on the run. And so here we have all the lists that go with these spots. So we want to have a look at I'm going to look at the First Kings verse first, if you will. I'm going to do it in reverse, which is usually not my style, as you know. I'm usually the go to the first occurrence type of person. But in First Kings chapter 2, if you want to turn there with me, as I get there, it's later in time. In fact, it's after David is fallen asleep and his son Solomon is taking the reign. And then you have this story of Shimei, which has a great story of lots of lessons. But Achish comes part of the story. And the short part of it here in First Kings chapter 2, here's Achish's name in verses 39 and 40, as we can see them there. And Shimei, I've considered that he falls from grace. Now it comes back later when we look at the last Philistine we'll look at, which is Attai, when he goes to the brook up when David is on the run. Shimei is the man who, when he got to the brook Kidron, started cursing David. And David says at his death to Solomon, you do what you think is right with Shimei, and he tells Shimei that he has to. Here it is, in the king verse. We go to 1 Kings chapter 2 and starting at verse 36. The king sent and called for Shimei and said unto him, build thee a house in Jerusalem and dwell there, and go not thence any thither. And it shall be that on the day that thou goest and pass out over the brook Kidron, that thou shalt know for a certainty that thou shalt surely die. Thy blood shall be upon thine own head. And Shimei said unto the king, saying, it is good, for my lord the king hath said, so shall thy servant do. And Shimei dwelt at Jerusalem many days. And it came to pass that at the end of 3 years, And two of the servants of Shimei ran away unto Achish, the son of Mecha, the king of Gath. And they told Shimei, saying, Behold, thy servants be at Gath. And Shimei arose, and he saddled his ass, and he went to Gath to Achish to seek his servants. And Shimei went and brought his servants from Gath. And of course, and then in verse 31, it was told to Solomon that Shimei had gone to Jerusalem and to Gath. And of course, part of the sort of Shimei's sake is that Solomon lays truth to his word, and Shimei is put to death. But it's kind of funny, isn't it, that the servants of Shimei would go to Gath as a place to escape, where they would be safe. And that he would think it'd be okay for him to go there and go and get them back, that would be all right. So he must have, it seems that there was peace at that time, and that Achish, or this Achish, I'm going to put, is okay. They're able to go there. In fact, the whole story is about the parable of the wicked servant, if we would, right? The one who wouldn't forgive the small debt, but was forgiven a great debt, that kind of thing. That's found in Matthew 18. Well, this Achish, the Achish we want to look for in 1 Samuel 27, what we get to, his name is Achish ben Maoch. And this Achish has a different father. And so I'm not sure that they're the same person. I mean, David was a young man when he first goes to Gath. He wasn't king yet, and he reigned for 30 years. So he was well in age. And so, and I don't think that Achish would have been particularly a young man and be king already and reigning with the Philistines. And so it's quite possible that this is a different Achish. And then it goes with that Achish might be a term that, as Unger suggests, a title, like Abimelech. Now we come up, then that takes care of our last occurrence of Achish, the one that we were looking at. And so he falls from grace. And so now I'll look at a little bit of, just follow with me with this map. Why would David go to Gath? It's a little bit about Achish. And what about why would David go to Gath? Well, if you look in the purple here, over on the menu tells us a table, the purple is the area that the Israelites consider to be their part of their domain that Saul reigned. It's the hill country, right? And they don't have control of the Philistines, the Shephelah, or any part down into the south. And so the one we would say is that David could get out of Saul's part that somebody would say word or have influence on him. So that might be one idea. Like, who is Achish and why did David run unto him? Now we talk a little bit about who Achish is, that he's a Philistine, a king, and that he's taking over the hereditary title, if you will. And he lives up to that type, which we will explore a little bit more. But I think some of the things that David went to is that why he went there is that he was sore afraid of Saul, that Saul would take his life. And I don't, before he got too far, that means he's thinking, well, he's not being very faithful, because he was anointed king and he was told by Samuel that he would become king. But maybe, I don't know, but maybe it would be that David thought that he would not be able to restrain himself, and maybe he would take Saul's life because he'd be forced to, or something like that. Remember, this second time that he goes to Gath, which we have here at 1 Samuel chapter 27, which we will turn to and have a little look at in just a minute. It's after the second time that David had spared Saul's life. This is the time when he had taken his spear and with that, and then he says to himself that he needs to get away from Saul. And again, without having a whole lot of information about Achish, why would David think that Achish would receive him? And why would he go there? And Achish does receive him. So now we turn to where we're going to go here is 1st of Samuel, chapter 27. Scoot over there in your Bibles, as I am as well. And so here it is in the first 3 verses. And David said in his heart, I shall now perish one day by the hand of Saul, and there is nothing better for me that I should speedily escape into the land of the Philistines, and Saul shall despair of me and seek me no more any coast of Israel, and I shall escape out of his hand. And so David arose, and he passed over with 600 men, and those that were with him unto Achish, the son of Maach, the king of Gath. And David dwelt with Achish at Gath, he and his men, and every man with his household, David with his 2 wives, and Ahinoam and the Jezreelite, and Abigail the Carmelitess, Nabal's wife. And it was told Saul that David had fled to Gath, and he sought him no more again. And so it worked. I mean, David says, I've got to get out of this situation. I can't keep putting myself in this conflict directly with Saul. I have to do something about it. And this is the solution. And he goes to the land of the Philistines, and it was a place where Saul would not go or could not go. That's where we have the second point, that he would not be welcome, or he would be afraid to go. And as we said, there was some expectation, he being David, would be received well when he was there. And so while he's there, verse 5, we get some more. You can imagine now, David, this isn't just a few people with him. He's got 600 men, all their families, as it's saying, with their households, as David is with his 2 wives. Now, we plan out an ecclesial retreat for a weekend with a lot less people, and look at all the resources that go into it, the time and everything, and all the food and accommodations and all of that. Can you imagine trying to house 600 visitors that come into the city, and what a ruckus that would be? And so David asks, rightly so, and he says in verse 5, and David says to Achish, if I have found grace in thine eyes, let me give me a place in some town in the country, that I may dwell there, that I shall have a servant. Why should thy servant dwell in the royal city with thee? And this is one of the key parts that we get from Achish, is that what David plays to that he considers himself one of the royal cities, considers himself to have his own kingdom. That's what the Philistines were about. They were city kingdoms. So he represents in some cases, the kingdom of men. And David says, well, why should I stay with you? And Achish gives him Ziklag that day. Therefore Ziklag pertaineth unto the kings of Judah unto this day. And David dwelt in the country of the Philistines a full year and 4 months. And I'm going to say that with the inclination they remember there's somebody else who dwelt in the land of the Philistines, and dwelt with a guy not named Achish, but his name was Abimelech. He had that title, and he was in the land of the Philistines for a long time. That's the way it says out in Genesis. Now, when David was there's another little map. David going to Gath up at the top. He goes. I'm doing them in reverse. So he goes the first time, and he comes back out. He goes through the hill country of Judah. He goes over to Moab, which is over here. He comes back. He got a lot of action going on around all these in the wilderness of Judah, and then you have him returning back to Gath, and he says, "Well, there's just too many of them," and so he's gained a lot of people. And who are all these people? That's another good question. Are they all Israelites? It's obvious that some of them will. And I'm going to suggest to you that they were not all Israelites. I suggest to you that some of them were Philistines. and we're going to see a part of that. And so he goes to get Ziklag, and it's not sure which one this was. So there's one here, one here. And so David, when Achish asks him another question, part of the story, and building up the allegory and Achish's character, he asks David, where did he make a road? And so, Philistines, as we looked at last time, they're in this world to be in this world, whereas we're to be a Hebrew, and we're to be in this world, but not of this world. We're looking for a city whose maker and builder is God. But the Philistines, they were going to go and make their own city, royal cities, right? That's their MO. And so that's what Achish is asking David. Where did you go to pave your own road down the highway? Or like, where did you expand out? And David tells him, well, I fought against the Gershurites, the Amalekites, and those are the people who are around him. But he kind of says, well, I fought in the Negev of Judah, the south of Judah, which is a geographical term. And it may have been taken, it seems that the suggestion is that Achish took it that he'd fought against some of the Israelites, but indeed he had not. And there was no one around to say anything different. And some put that as being a little bit not telling the whole truth. And it seems that but Achish saw and believed what he wanted to see and what he wanted to believe. That's the way I would put that, which is what happens. We know that's what happens when we take on the carnal mind and we fool ourselves. We see what we want to see and we do what we want to do. And it's only when our conscience can get pricked, and we'd say that happens from the power of the word, the reminders, and of whatever mechanism that comes from. And then we come to our right mind. That's the way the scriptures looks at it. We come back to our right mind, and our heart is deflated, and we're beside ourselves to know what we're going to do. So here they are. This is how David come up. Here's another part of what David comes with his ideas with Achish. It's in chapter 28 here. And it says, and it came to pass in those days that the Philistines gathered their armies together for warfare to fight against Israel. And Achish said to David, know thou for a surety that thou wilt go with me to battle, thou and thy men. And David says to Achish, surely thou shalt know what thy servant can do. And Achish said unto David, therefore I will make thee a keeper of mine head forever. And so this relationship that they have is that Achish says, you're going to fight, for me. When I going to go to make my fight, you're going to come up and fight with me and for me. In fact, and David says, well, I'm good at that. And he says, well, I'm going to make you keeper of my head forever. You're going to be responsible for me when we go into these parts. And so Achish has a part where he tries to get to, I would explain this as one of those spots where Achish uses David for his material blessings. And it seems to be that's what happens when you get this type. They use them for the material blessings. They recognize them for some of the spiritual blessings, as we'll see a little bit later. But what they really want is the material blessings. And they uses David as a protection and as a guard against others. And that's exactly what Achish does in this case. So here's the final part of the end. Here's a little hand-drawn map. David's down here in the bottom at Ziklag. The Philistines gather themselves up from their royal cities with the little crowns here. And off they go up to the top, as we read, where they're going to gather themselves. And this is when the rest of the Philistines say, well, as we read this evening, that ain't right. What are the Hebrews doing here? What is David doing here? Isn't this the David whom they sing? You know, they sing to themselves, Saul has killed his thousands and David has killed his 10,000s, right? And saying that, so, David completely kills more than Saul, right? 10 times more. And so he has to give in. And when he goes to give in, when he speaks, this is I'll come back to that point in a moment because it happens again and there's a comparison there. But when he goes to explain this stuff to David, why he can't go, look what he says to David. Take note of this. It's in verse 6. Achish calls David aside, and he said unto him, surely as Yahweh liveth, thou hast been upright. Now, where did he get that term from? Where is he learning that? I mean, where we have even heard that in any part of his conversation? So I think it's an indicator of that he's been talked to a little bit. He's been heard a few Bible classes, a lecture, something, or like that. Or even if it's not firsthand, it's secondhand. Something is going on there. A little bit even more of that, I would say, is you come back later when he says in verse 9, because David says, well, I should go up with you. And he holds his ground, and David can't go with him. But in verse 9, Achish answered and said to David, I know that thou art good in my sight, as an angel of God. Notwithstanding, the princes of the Philistines have said, he shall not go up to battle with us. Excuse me. As an angel of God, as the messenger of God. That's who you've been. I know that. But you can't come with us, fight this battle. And that's a peculiar term, wouldn't it be? That one would say that to David, I know that you have been this thing. So Achish, lukewarmly, if you will, or not completely, might be the right thing, or not completely yet, if he's the in-between person between David and Ittai, a little foreshadowing there, that he's not quite there. And every person of stature who's a king, who wants the material things in this life, and there are plenty of examples in the Bible. I'm brown out there, right? They hang on to their material stuff. They recognize the spiritual blessings. They almost get there. Say like Festus, is it Festus or Agrippa who says to Paul, you've gone mad. You almost convinced me, right, to become a Christian. Or that they won't let go, or that, or Herod, who won't let go, or in the case of an Israelite, Ahab, he won't let go. He's almost there, but he's a king, and he should let go, but he won't let go of the material parts. And so Achish has that. Now coming back to that, he listened to the princes of the Philistines, or as Lee wrote, the captains, read was the captains. That's exactly what happens in the first occurrence. He listens to the servants. It says the servants of Achish whisper in Achish's ear the same thing. David has killed his thousands. Saul has killed his thousands, and David has killed his 10,000s. And David is afraid of what happens that day. And who else did that? Well, it was Saul. Saul, when it came time to make a decision, he listened to the people and not to the messenger of God, which was Samuel at that time. And so this is the test of his trial, and he fails at this time, or these two times, if you will, or that. He failed to take in David, and he failed to take in David, or David's type. And so it builds up part of what we go on. Now, when we look at Psalm 34 for just a second, we've made that connection. When we go to 1st of Samuel chapter 21, and maybe in your margin as it is in mine, it says that links up this part. It's when David changed his behavior before Achish in 1st of Samuel 21, but in Psalm 34 it says before Abimelech. And so we're saying, well, this Abimelech that's being named in Psalm 34, he's our Achish. And so you can make some comparisons. There we go. And so Abimelech is Achish, is what we would say. And then we'd ask some other questions. Who else has been friendly terms with Abimelech? And of course, one of them was Abraham, and he had a couple of incidences with him, and so did Isaac. Isaac also had some interference. And what happened with it was it's the same thing that David went through, is that they recognized that Abimelech, recognized that that God was with Abraham. In fact, the first instance, God goes to Abimelech and says, "You're a dead man. You're going to take someone else's wife. She's married. You can't do that." And what Abimelech says back to Abraham is that, why would you do that? Why would you put this on my kingdom? That's what he says to him. Why would you put this on my kingdom? Now things are going to go bad for my kingdom's sake. And they have a little fallout a couple of times about some wells and and sharing the water. Even later on, after Abraham has passed away and Isaac is on, he ends up dealing probably with a different Abimelech, right? Again, and same thing, arguing over the material resources, that they're too close to Abimelech's kingdom. But he didn't want them to be too far away, because he recognized that they were protected, that God was with them. That's what they both say that at the same in their conversations. Now I know that's putting it in a pretty broad strokes, but if I went through all the details, I'll just end up being too long. So to group that together, here they are, the Achish and the Abimelech character type. They have their own kingdom, their royal city. They take notices how God is with them. That would be David, Abraham, Isaac. They're friends with them, but mostly for the material benefits and the protection. They get close, but not too close, right? They just want to be friends, it seems, with that, right? And here's those two spiritual indications that we alluded to in our reading from 1 Samuel 29. Achish says, "Surely as Yahweh liveth," and he also says that you have been like a messenger of God with me. And so here's that part. I'm going to go with so we've taken care of Shimei's fall of grace, and we've had a look at the second encounter with 1 Samuel chapter 29. So now we look a little bit at the first encounter, and I'm a little nervous about it, because if I go to Psalm 34, I won't get out of there, and I have some things that take a little bit of a technical matter to get when it gets in there to how some of the translation is. And I'm a little hesitant because I've presented this a couple times, and I haven't really had a whole lot of action, or not that anybody outright disagreed with me, but not a whole lot of people talked with me or said that they did agree. There was a little bit of discussion, but not a whole lot. So we're going to ask these questions of who Achish is, and I think we've got a little bit of understanding of that. Put a little check mark there. But why did David go to him? That's still a little bit of a question mark. I mean, why would he do that? It seems so out of characteristics. There were people in Israel that he could go to. He even went to Moab, where he put his father and his mother. He could have stayed there. Why did he go back? And so I want to go back to this first part, what I think is key, is that when we have the rejection of Saul, it says that the Lord hath sought a man after his own heart. That's what he says to Samuel in 1 Samuel 13:14. And so it's this part that's David with that. And David gets known as it's going to see here in Acts, we put the Bible verse up. And you'll recall this. And this is, it says, "And when he had removed him, he raised up unto David to be their king, whom he had gave testimony, and he said, I have found David the son of Jesse, a man after mine own heart, which shall fulfill my will. And so this is from Acts 13. So David is trying to do, or has been found of that. That's what God was looking for. And David finds himself as being that. In fact, it's early on. Remember when Samuel comes to Jesse's house to anoint one of the sons, and he doesn't know which one it is. He looks at the first one, and he's tall and handsome, or whatever it is, and he says, "No, no, no, not that one. Stop looking at the countenance. You need to look at the heart." And he goes through the whole lot of them, and along comes, and last but not least, is David, and he's the young, and at that time, and so he may have been the runt of the litter, if you will. He was small at that time, at that particular time, because I think David was pretty tall when he went after Goliath, as we know from last class. But he's told to look after that, and it says from that day forward, he anoints David to be the future king of Israel. And it says at that time the Spirit of the Lord came onto him. And so the first principle of that is that when you get some of the word into you and it has that influence on you, and if you allow it, which is what the Lord is looking for, you start to align your goals up with God. You start to understand them. You start to have them as your goals, and you go forth. It's what your heart's desire. As it says, wherever your treasure is, there will your heart be also. So what do you treasure? That's the question. What did David treasure? What is David known for? Now, if you go back to Acts chapter 7, I do want you to turn there. And I'm going to bring that up on the screen. But in Acts chapter 7, it's Stephen's apology, if you will, his speech. That's an old English term. His apology that he's given. And near the end of it, the part of David we'll find is, as we said, is in verses 45 and 46. But what's the context of this part? Well, the context of this part is that they're talking about tabernacles and places of worship. And they've gone the wrong way, as it will, depending on when we're going to turn in. So if you find at verse 41, they made him a calf in those days, and they offered sacrifices unto an idol, and rejected the works of their own hands. And they rejoiced in the works of their own hands. And God turned them up over to their own worship, the host of heaven, as it is written in the book of the prophets. O ye house of Israel, have ye not offered me slain beasts and sacrifice of the space of 40 years in the wilderness? And they took up a tabernacle of Molech, and the star of your God, Rephaim, and figures which ye made, and worshipped them. And I will carry you beyond Babylon. Well, our fathers, they had a tabernacle in the wilderness, and as he had appointed, speaking unto Moses, that they should make it according to the fashion which ye have seen, which our fathers also came and brought with Joshua into possession of the Gentiles, which God drave out before the face of our fathers unto the days of David, who found favor with God and desired to find a tabernacle for the God of Jacob. And Solomon built him an house. Howbeit the Most High dwelleth not in temples made with hands, as a prophet. Heaven is my throne, and the earth is my footstool. What house will you build me, saith the Lord? And what place will you rest? And so the whole context is about building a place of worship. And it goes from how they made the mistakes. And David says of David in this case that he stopped driving the enemies out, right? And David found favor because he wanted to build the house. And that is what I believe this is talking about. When you go back to 2 Samuel chapter 7, with the promises of David, 2 Samuel chapter 7, and reading right in the first few verses. And it came to pass that when the king, David, had sat in his house, and the Lord had given him rest round about from all his enemies, so no more Goliath to deal with. And the king said unto Nathan, See now, I dwell in a house of cedar, and the ark of God dwelleth in curtains. And Nathan says unto the king, Go and do all which is in thine heart, for the Lord is with thee. And the short part of it is that David wanted to build a place where everyone could come and worship, the house of nations for house of prayer for all nations. And so he's the instigator of that. And so this is, I think, is an indicator of what David is going to do. David is going to go and not kill every Philistine he meets, although he did kill more Philistines, as we say. He killed the ones that were that type, the rest of Goliath's family later on. But some Philistines he spoke the truth to. He converted Philistines. And we know that is coming up because that's what we're going to see coming up with that. He started this process, right? The word gives us this 6. We see that with that. He would have seen this serpent in Numbers, the brazen serpent up on the pole. But the individual who got bit had to come here and look at this. And so there'd be some contemplation. Of course, he saw Goliath. And of course, we've been, how far did he see Christ in this part? How did he see? I don't know. But it seems to indicate it quite a bit. And so the little pieces are there, and you have to put them together. This is what David saw himself. This is the power that the word has. If you will take it in, it will clear that vision up for you. Everyone has to go through that. Even Abraham, he had to go through this process. Take thine son, thine only begotten son, the one that I've promised you, and sacrifice him. This is what how the process goes. So now then we come back to the first place, which we're looking at last a little bit. It's 1 Samuel chapter 21, where David first goes to Achish. And I don't want to spend too much time here because we still got to get to Ittai, and I don't have a whole lot of verses and slides for him because he's not mentioned that many times. But we'll still see some of his characteristics will shine through anyway. But David is on the run here, and he's been on the run because Saul has put him on the run. And the short of it is that he goes to his house, and Saul sends messengers to his house, and he can't escape. He even has to leave his wife behind. And so he goes with it. And so he goes to Samuel for his protection. And he stays at Samuel with the school of the prophets. That's what I'm getting at here with this slide. And then he goes and sees his best friend in the world, or best friend in the kingdom would be a better phrase. And you know who that is. That's Jonathan. And they have the heart-to-heart, and they make a covenant together, and brother to brother. And we know that story and how great that is. And David takes comfort from there. Because imagine this is where he's running. Can't go home. Goes to Samuel, goes to Jonathan, then he goes to Nob. That's what's in the start of the chapter is, and then he's going to go to Gath. Seems a bit he's going the wrong way. But see, he went to the tabernacle. Now, where did he get that suggestion? Well, he asks for some weapons of Ahimelech, and he says, "Well, there's none here." Verse 8 of 1 Samuel 28. There's none here, neither have I brought my sword, David says, or weapons, because of the king's business was haste. And the priest said, well, I have the sword of Goliath, the Philistine here, whom thou slewest in the valley of Elah. And behold, it's wrapped in the cloth behind the ephod. If thou wilt take it, for there is no other save here. And David said, well, there's none other like that. Let me have it. And so he takes that sword. And I think this is where he would got the indicate, well, I should go to Gath. I mean, it makes sense, but you don't want to go there. But who's with them? This is where I got these people up, Heman, Asaph, Jeduthun, God, and Nathan. I don't think all of them were with him at that he picked them all up at the school of the prophets. But the beginning of this chapter is that he asks for the showbread, and that he asked for 5 loaves of the showbread. And I think that means that there were 5 of them there. And some of these guys were there. These guys are known as prophets and seers. They were kindred hearts with David. They were those who became known leaders in the kingdom, in the temple running, right? That they were divided out. in the Levites, and how they would be, how it would run. The things that Samuel told David and wrote it in a book of the kingdom, as he says, that he took to David took the information and Saul didn't. And so these are the kindred spirits that David would be with, and he's with them. And off he goes to Gath with this first incident. Now, he has this first incident, and it's a bit unpleasant the way that it's translated in my mind. And so you have Achish, he says, when he gets there, for fear of Saul, verse 10, the Achish, the son of Gath. And then in verse 11, the servants of Achish said to him, is this not David, the king of the land? And does he not sing to one another that he dances and singeth, and Saul hath slain his thousands, and David hath slain his 10,000s? And then David lays these words up to his heart, and he was sore afraid of Achish, king of Gath, that day. Now, this phrase of the dancing and the singing, because Saul had killed his thousands and David his 10,000s, every time that comes up, it comes up and Saul says, no, that's not right. It comes up here and Achish says, no, that's not right. It comes up again and Achish says, no, that's not right. You see where they get to the material part? It influences them in the wrong way. Now it says that David changed his behavior, and he did change his behavior. But that he says that he framed himself mad, that's what I take inference to. And the logistical part of that, using the language and the lexicons, or that is, they'll say, well, I think even the ESV, no dig, it says insane. But what they use here, I don't think it's insane as in mad, as David is cuckoo, lost, a few bricks short of a load, lost some of his marbles, or like that kind of thing. That he's mad as in angry, mad as in boasting, mad as he's being stirred up. And David had to change his behavior before them, that part. Maybe he wasn't angry and he needed to be angry. But the whole words, he framed himself mad, are related to a cognizant word of Hallel, which is praise, glory, and the negative side of that, of course, is to boast and to be prideful. In fact, it's used of David in Psalm 52 when he speaks of Doeg, who are introduced to here the Edomite, and he says, why boastest thou, thou man of mischief, or evil man? That's the same cognizant word. Achish does call David mad in that sense, but when does people get called mad? I have to do this a little bit, part of a summary part, is, well, they called Jesus mad. They said that he had a devil. They called John the Baptist mad. They said that he also had a devil. They called Saul mad, as I said, within said, you've gone mad, Saul, being a Christian. There are other parts of that come, and that's what happens when you start to talk to people about the truth, and you go a part of that. If you start to talk about how killing the sacrifice of Jesus and what that means to us personally, they start to think you're mad. You start to say, well, Jesus is going to return and set up the kingdom of God on earth. They think you've gone a little cuckoo. So anyway, that's what I think that part is. In fact, even one of the known linguistics from the theological word book of the Old Testament, they say this is where we learn that this word means that it has the insane part. Well, I go to look to see what it means, and it says, well, this is where we learn it means to be insane. It's kind of like the fossils and the rocks with the geology. How old are the rocks? Well, how old are the fossils? And they say, well, how old are the fossils? And they say, well, how old are the rocks? And so they come up with their answer the same way. So I'll leave that with you. I don't want to get too dragged into that part. Here it is a little bit that the Psalm 34 does not use the Hallel cognate word. Right here of 1984 is the Hallel. Just a little bit of a FYI, and please do look at it. But let's get on to Attai. Now, I'm not sure if I'm enunciating his or pronouncing his name correctly, and I'll ask for forgiveness in the kingdom if if when we get there. And so what we have of him, just like we did with everybody else, we look at his name and we search it out. And here's the Strong's numbers up here: 863 and 854 and 859. It means near and you. And so here's the occurrences down at the bottom using lexicon. Sorry, you got 7 occurrences, and this is when we're introduced to him, and later on when this is David going out, and this is after David has come back with the Absalom incident. And so Attai, he's a Philistine. He's a Gittite, because when we find with him, it means he's from Gath. And his name means near you or with you. And I would put that his name means, well, I've got your back. That's what it is. Because the incidents, if you go there, and I want us to go there, in 2 Samuel chapter 15, if you will turn there with me. Here it is in 2 Samuel chapter 15, and you have the first occurrence. And it's this same incident, if you will, when we started, when Shimei, which is a couple of chapters afterwards, the original instance, that he curses David. So you have your own Israelites cursing David as he's going out, and here's Attai coming on the scene. And so picking up the record in verse who can see who other people who are mentioned. Verse 18, all the servants passed beside him, all the Kiriathites and all the Pelethites and all the Gittites, 600 men that came after him from Gath and passed on before the king. I don't think that's a coincidence that there's 600 of them. I don't think that's a coincidence that they're Gittites and they're Kiriathites and Pelethites. These are the terms of those who come, they're Philistines. They're Gentiles. They're those from those areas, even those that have come from Gath. And then you're introduced to Attai. And then said the king unto Attai the Gittite, wherefore hast thou comest with us? Return to thy place and abide with the king, for thou art a stranger and an exile. That's a play on his, what a Philistine means, right? That he's a stranger and an exile, because that's what the Philistine means, as we looked at last time. Whereas thou comest but yesterday, and today thou go up and down with us, seeing that thou may return thou, and take back thy brethren. Mercy and truth be with thee. And Attai answered the king and said, as the Lord liveth, and as my lord the king liveth, surely in what place that my lord the king shall be, whether death or life, even there shall all thy servant also be. And so he answers back, no way. He's ready to go with them. He packed up his whole household. Him and all his families, they're ready to cross over and to be with David while he's trying to escape. They're taking things to the extreme. They're with him. It's kind of like Ruth. I will go where you will go, or Rahab. I'm with you. And so David said unto verse 22. David said to Attai, go and pass over. And Attai the Gittite passed over, and all his men with them, all their little ones, and everywhere with them. And so their whole families and everything are with them, and off they go, and they're with David from that time forward. And then you have later on, after the ending of David comes back to Jerusalem, and now there's the final part where Absalom gets slain. You have Attai is mentioned again. There it is in 2 Samuel chapter 18. And so pick it up in 2 Samuel chapter 18. David had numbered the people, verse 1, and where they were with him, and he set captains over thousands and captains over hundreds over them. And David sent forth a third part of the people under the hand of Joab, and a third part under the hand of Abishai, the son of Zeruiah, Joab's brother, and a third part under the hand of Attai the Gittite. And the king said unto all the people, I will surely go forth myself with you. Now there is somebody who's been given a very high place in Israel. He is over a third part of the king's armies, the king's hosts, as we have down up on the screen. He's 1/3 over the army, and off they go. Now, when the young man that finds Absalom, well, actually, before that, sorry, jump too fast. Verse 5, here's the king's commandment to Joab, Abishai, and Ittai. Deal gently for my sake with the young man, even Absalom. And all the people heard, and the king gave the captains charge concerning Absalom. And so he charges them, gives him the charge, and that trusts his son's life to him. And in fact, the guy who finds Absalom and says to Joab, "I found him," he complains back to Joab, getting to the our main point, is that verse 12. The man said unto Joab, "Though I should receive 1,000 shekels of silver in my hand, yet would I not put forth my hand against the king's son. For the hearing of the king charged thee, Abishai and Ittai, saying, Beware that none should touch the young man Absalom. Otherwise I would have wrought falsehood against mine own life, and for there is no matter hid from the king, and thou thyself would have set thyself against me." And by implication, if he had done what Joab said, even Ittai would have answered the call. That's who the charge would be. He could be trusted, even with the king's son. This is a brother in Christ. And so when we look at the David and the Philistines and the three ones that we've picked out, let's say that we have cherry picked them a little bit. Goliath is maybe the most known one that we all have. Achish is a little more, we know a little bit, learn about him, and we put him with Abimelech, and he's kind of like the interested friend. But there are other Philistines, as we're aware of, in other places, like Ittai. They become brothers in Christ, fully converted. They go right through the whole process from one side to the other. And so the main principle we want to get, brothers and sisters and young people, from this, at looking at David and the Philistines, of course, is those lessons. But the first principles are that God rules in the kingdom of men. And we've seen that he manipulated the nations as he does all the time, even today. And he used the Philistines as a powerful allegory. And that powerful allegory is that the seed of the serpent to become the seed of the woman. And you have to be the which part of it, the transformation of that. And when that comes to its full final transformation, his glory will fill the earth from sea to sea. And I thank you very much for your kind attention. And I am open to all kinds of questions. In fact, I enjoy them. Anyway, I'll turn that back over to you, Lee.